Hi, I'm David Maldo, and in this video, I'm going to bring up the view from 4 different webcams so that you can compare them side by side. This is one of a series of videos comparing over a dozen webcams. We're doing them in a round robin so you can see each of them in a head-to-head. Before we get started, a quick disclaimer. Logitech has sponsored this series of videos. However, they asked me to keep it neutral. I'm not going to share any of my own opinions. I'm just going to show it to you and let you see for yourselves. As part of keeping things fair, I'm leaving all the cameras on their default settings. Usually I like to tweak the brightness, the contrast, to try to optimize things, but I don't want to subconsciously bias anything in favor of one camera over another, so I'm just going to leave everything on their defaults. Okay, so let's bring up our 4 cameras. In this video, we're going to compare the Logitech C930e, the Logitech C310, the Adesso H2, and the CyberAcoustics CA Essential. The first thing we look at is our aspect ratio, and that just means the shape of the window that we're in. The 2 Logitech cameras and the CyberAcoustic camera are a 16:9 aspect ratio. So for every 16 pixels or inches or centimeters going across, there's 9 going up and down. The result is this familiar rectangular shape, which is what most video conferencing software is looking for. The Adesso H2 is a 4:3 aspect ratio. For every 4 pixels across, there's 3 up and down. This is the shape of old TV shows from when I was a kid, and the result is you'll get these black bars on either side of the screen in most video conferencing software. Related to the aspect ratio is our field of view, or how wide our shot is, how much of the room the camera captures. So judge for yourself with each of these cameras. If I had a colleague sitting next to me, could they be in on the meeting? If I talk with my hands, how much of that comes across as I'm talking to you? One last point to mention on the view is you'll notice the Adesso camera is mirrored. The text on the Coca-Cola box is backwards and the microphone is on the other side of my head. It's mirroring the view. And that might be useful for some applications, but generally for video conferencing, you want your unmirrored view. The next thing we're going to check is distortion, or how well it handles our straight lines. Now, these video cameras are doing a pretty tough job. They're trying to focus in on my face, and they're also trying to capture the room. So generally, there'll be a little bit of curvature around the outside edges, but you just don't want it to be too bad. So I tried to include a lot of straight lines behind me for you to judge. This cabinet has a lot of straight lines, the curtain rod holding up the green screen, some of the decorations behind me, and just judge for yourself how well the lines look. The next thing we're going to look at is color. And again, normally I would adjust this in the settings to optimize, but here we're going with our defaults. I tried to put a bunch of items behind me with a lot of different colors for you to look at. We have green, red, orange, purple, blue, brown. But the thing is, there's 2 things we need to keep in mind when looking at color. The first is, does it look good? Does the blue wall look like a nice blue wall? But it also has to look right, and unless you've been in my office, you don't know what shade of blue this is. That's why I included there it is, the Coca-Cola box, because we all know what Coca-Cola red is. So see if it looks accurate to you. Not just does it look good, but does the red look like Coca-Cola red? Next, we're going to take a look at our exposure. And like many home workers, I don't have ideal lighting here. Some of my lights are a little too bright. I'm a little overexposed in some areas, and I need more lighting in other areas. I have a bunch of shadows. So judge for yourself how each of these cameras is dealing with this less than perfect lighting situation. The next thing we want to compare is the sharpness or the clarity of our images, and that's primarily determined by the resolution of the camera. The more pixels there are on the screen, the more detail we should get. The Adesso H2 is 480p, 640 pixels going across by 480 going up and down. The Logitech C310 is 720p, 720 pixels up and down, 1280 going across. I consider anything 720p and above to be high definition, HD video. The Logitech C930e and the CA Essential are both at 1080p, 1080 pixels up and down, 1920 pixels across. So take a look for yourself and see what you think about the clarity of each camera's image. The last thing we're going to test is audio. Each of these cameras has an internal microphone. And up till now, I've been using the microphone on this Logitech Zone headset to keep it neutral between the cameras, but now we're going to switch to each camera in turn. To make it more of a real-world test, we're adding a couple elements. One is background noise. I have an air conditioner that's really loud, and the fans on my computer are just humming away, so we'll see how the cameras deal with that. The other is some crowd noise. If I'm working in a crowded area, I'm going to play this file on the computer now. Just people talking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play it here on my phone, so it'll be ambient, and we'll see if the cameras are picking it up. The headset's probably not picking it up. It's really not supposed to, so you might not be hearing it at all right now, but we're going to see how the cameras do with it. So let's switch to our first camera. You're now hearing me through the Logitech 930e. So decide for yourself how I sound. How well can you understand me? Can you make out what I'm saying? Can you hear me over the background noise, the fans in my office? if I was working in a crowded area, would you still be able to make out what I'm saying over what the crowd is saying? And as long as we're here, I'll just keep talking for a minute so you can hear how it sounds. And let's take a look at everything else, take a closer look since we've zoomed in on everything else that we've talked about. So what do we think about our aspect ratio, our field of view? Could I have a colleague sitting next to me working and being in on the meeting? If I talk with my hands, does that come across? How is our distortion? Do our straight lines on everything behind me look straight, the guitar necks? How is it dealing with our color? Does our Coca-Cola red look like Coca-Cola red? How do we think it's handling the exposure? My light's at a little too bright in some places and a little too shadowy in other places. Is it handling it okay? And finally, the sharpness, the level of detail. Decide what you think about that. And let's go to our next camera. You're now hearing me through the Logitech C310. And again, how do I sound? Can you make out what I'm saying over my background noise, my air conditioners, my fans? If we're working in a long meeting, can you understand me? Can we work together? And if I'm in a crowded area, we have our background chatter. Can we still get some work done? Can you make out what I'm saying over my rude colleagues here? And while we're here, let's take a better look at everything we've talked about in our zoomed in view. What do we think about the field of view? If I needed to, could I have another colleague working with me? If I talk with my hands, does that come across? What do we think about our straight lines, our distortion? On our designs, our guitar necks, do the straight lines look straight? What do we think about the color handling? Does our Coca-Cola red look like Coca-Cola red? How well is its exposure handling? How well is it dealing with my less than perfect lighting? And finally, the sharpness, the details on me, my face, my chair, everything behind me. What do you think about the clarity of the camera? And with that, let's go on to our next camera. You're now hearing me through the Adesso H2. And again, how do I sound? Can you understand what I'm saying if we're working together? Can you hear me over the fans in my office? If we have our crowd noise, if I'm working in a crowded area, can we still get some work done? Can you make out what I'm saying? And as long as we're here, let's take a closer look at everything we talked about so far. What do we think about our field of view, our aspect ratio? If I talk with my hands, can I talk with my hands? Can I have a colleague join me in this meeting? How well is the distortion? How well is it dealing with the straight lines on everything behind me? What do we think about the color? Is our Coca-Cola red? Where are we? Coca-Cola red, looking like Coca-Cola red. What about our exposure? How well is it dealing with the too close, too bright lights in some places and the shadows in other places? And finally, what do we think about the sharpness, the clarity of the image? And with that, let's go on to our last camera. You're now hearing me on the CA Essential. And again, how do I sound subjectively to you? Can we work together? Can you understand what I'm saying? Can you make out my words over the background noise of my fan? Let's bring in our noisy coworkers. If I'm working in a crowded area, can we still get some work done? Can you make out what I'm saying? And as long as we're here, let's take a closer zoomed in look at everything we've talked about so far. So what do we think about our field of view? If I wanted to have someone working with me, can they be on camera? If I talk with my hands, does that come across? Our straight lines, how do our guitar necks look? How does this cabinet look? Anything that, the designs that have straight lines, what do we think about the distortion? The color, how do the colors look? And do they look accurate? Does our Coca-Cola red look like Coca-Cola red? The exposure handling, the lights being a little bit too close and too many shadows in some other places, is it making it okay? And the sharpness, the level of detail. And I feel like I should mention when we're talking about the sharpness, and maybe this is something that normally I would fix in the settings, it looks like it's having a little trouble deciding if it should focus on me or the things behind me, and it's shifting a bit. I don't know if that's something with the camera or something you need to set, but I just couldn't help but notice it. Now obviously audio is really subjective, but you know what sounds good to you. And remember, the key is we're using these for business meetings, so it's just a matter of coming across clearly. I don't want you straining to understand what I'm saying if we're in a meeting. I just want you focusing on being productive. So that wraps up this video. I hope you come back to check out the rest of the series so you could see all the head-to-head matchups, and I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching.